Merry Christmas. I'm Jeff.
I'm Marcy.
And welcome to the Kind Faith for Couples. We're talking about gifts at Christmas time, and we've got a gift that gets overlooked often, and we're going to talk about that today. It is the Wednesday before Christmas on Friday, and so we got a few things going on. We have a huge, monumental global thing happening, and the deadline's tomorrow.
Yeah, so hurry up and make your YODA Christmas cookies, and hashtag take a picture, hashtag kind YODA
on Instagram.
Uh-huh. And we're having an international competition for that from Israel and the UK and Africa, so it's going to be fun.
So jump in, it'll be a blast. And then like us, subscribe, and important news is if you're not up for watching this, you can download the podcast. Anywhere you look for podcasts, we're using the Anchor app to upload podcasts so you can listen to this. We'd love for you to either listen and rate us or watch and like us and subscribe. We would love it. So let's dive into what we're talking about this week. It's a gift that is so important. It's the foundation of this whole Christmas season.
Right.
God became man so that he could die for our sins on the cross and provide new life and bring in his kingdom. That's the whole thing. Forgiveness kind of lies at the heart of this Christmas season. That's the great gift.
So the gift is forgiveness.
Forgiveness. And we often forget to bring that into our marriages and give that to one another. I think, at least for me, when we got married, my thought was, here's this person and she's going to love me better than anybody else has. She's going to understand me better than anyone else has, which she has and does.
As best as I can.
But I didn't think that forgiveness was going to be a thing that I was going to have to practice within my marriage. I don't know. Maybe I was just naive or ignorant.
We're talking about practice.
Practice. So forgiveness and practicing forgiveness is so important in marriage. And I think at least what happened to me, did it happen to you? You can talk about this for yourself. But I began to get hurt in our marriage, and instead of moving first to exercise a muscle of forgiveness, I suffered or I kept score.
Oh, totally. Right. You suffer or you keep score, and that doesn't give you forgiveness. Or lend you to being forgiving. And it happens, it can happen at the wedding where as soon as you say I do, you're at the reception and something happens and you're like, oh my goodness, we couldn't even get an hour into this relationship and we're needing to forgive.
Yeah. So we tend to move our relationships into scorekeeping relationships where we're winning points. I mean, you hear it all the time in culture, right? You're going to win a lot of points for that one. You brought her flowers, or and we're constantly keeping this balance, and we're also suffering through. And I think there's a third one, and it's we're constantly working to change the other, to make behavior shifts, to get them to do things so that we're less annoyed or irritated. And all of those things happen, and we're going to talk about all of those things, but it's the forgiveness part that we forget.
Right, because you have to remember, once again, 67% of all of your conflicts are not resolvable. So therefore, you have a lot of forgiving to do. That's 3/4 of your conversations need to be forgiven practically.
There's going to be a lot of hurt.
Right, because you're so different.
Yeah.
So do you choose to keep score and keep, well, you did this 20 years ago, so therefore you did this 10 years ago, or whatever, and you just keep score of how many times the trash wasn't taken out on Tuesday because Wednesday's trash day or whatever. You have to just forgive and let it go.
So let's talk about that. Let's talk about giving the gift of forgiveness.
And what does forgiveness mean?
And what does forgiveness mean? So back on the message podcast, and you can go back and watch the messages, we started with talking about forgiveness. There's a 3-part process to forgiveness, and we'll take up the other 2 next week. But the first part is to humanize. The second is to release the right of vengeance. And the third is to allow your feelings or the story to change in forgiveness. But before we get into that first one, we need to make a difference. There's a difference between forgiving and reconciling. Do you want to talk about that?
Well, forgiving is not necessarily... Forgiving is letting go of the offense. And reconciling is having somebody feel what you felt. I mean, that's vengeance, but we're going to talk about that more next week. So, but for today, for forgiveness, you have to recognize, I guess the first part is that you have to recognize that you have had an offense or a wound. And that could have been because of your stuff. You know, like, why am I wounded that the trash wasn't taken out on time? Because we had a verbal contract that he takes out the trash. So why am I offended by that? Go ahead.
Yeah, so the offense is the key. That's the trigger. So when you feel offended, as opposed to suffering, scorekeeping, or working to change, and maybe some of those things need to happen, the first question that should be asked is there something I need to forgive here? Is there something I need to offer forgiveness around because I was wronged or hurt or things weren't fair or it was unjust? And so that's the first part of this whole thing is finding your triggers, those times when you realize you need to forgive. We'll walk into reconciliation later because you're right, it is about sharing feelings and about having them understand what you've gone through. That's reconciliation in a way that rebuilds trust so that you can restore relationship.
Right.
That's reconciliation, the restoration of relationship. Forgiveness is something I can do by myself. You don't need to do anything for me to forgive.
Right.
So
But I do need you to take out the trash.
Very true. There's a whole lot of things that need to happen. But in forgiveness, what's the trigger? And then the next piece, the first step of forgiveness is to humanize. To acknowledge the humanness. And for me, just being vulnerable, the first step is not to humanize Marcy, but to be human myself.
Right.
And to realize that I'm not perfect. And then approach that from a place where I'm not perfect. And then allow her to not be perfect.
Right. Thank you for that. So recognizing I was in a group class and we were talking about affirmations, which we've talked about, I think from our second couples podcast. And one of the affirmations is you are as a child and you always have been fallible. And that is the hardest thing to say, I am and I always will be fallible, because we are so prone in our culture to go for the A. It's like you can't acknowledge fallibility or vulnerability. You have to be perfect. And for heaven's sake, we only have one perfect person that ever lived, which is Christ, the perfect Savior. So to recognize that I am and I always have been fallible and say it, and Jeff is and he always will be fallible. It's not that he's trying to tick me off. He's busy and he's got things on his mind and he isn't intending to not take the trash out. He just missed it or skipped it.
And sometimes I'm a dork.
Well, okay, well maybe sometimes he was.
And sometimes I'm selfish. And sometimes I'm angry and judgmental and bitter and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. So right. We're not perfect. But when I humanize myself, when I realize I need to start doing work of forgiveness, and then I start to humanize myself and say, hey, I'm human. I'm not perfect. It allows me to then humanize Marcy and say, she's not perfect. She's she can be grumpy. She can fly off the handle. She can have a short temper.
Or just have a bad day.
Uh-huh.
You know, you're just tired because of those 67%.
Yeah, that helps start the process. And then the second part is to look to intentions. A phrase that I've used often is, we judge other people by their behavior, but we want to be judged by our intentions. And it's a great gift in this process of forgiveness to listen into the intentions of our spouse, not just focus on the behavior. Well, you parked the car in the wrong space, or you took the trash cans out at the wrong day. But what's the intention under that? The intention was to do the right thing, maybe. But at least it's beginning to honor your spouse by looking beyond just the behavior and into the intentions. What were they intending to do? And it may have been they're just tired and didn't have the energy to do what they needed to do. And so their intention was they just needed rest. And that's humanizing them and looking at their intentions.
Right, and at least the car got parked. Or the trash cans got out. You know, so... Or dinner might not have been the dinner that you wanted, but at least there's food on the table. So there's a component of grace.
Yeah, and that's we didn't have that written down, but that is a really great point. That part of this forgiveness process is perspective giving to ourselves, to put the offense in context.
Right.
How bad of an offense is it? And then it may be horrible. So, but put it in its context, because a lot of times I give way more energy than I should to offenses that don't warrant the kind of energy I give to them.
Yes, you do. And so do I. And so do I.
We totally do. And then we'll close with this in terms of humanizing, and then we'll talk about where we're going next week. But we also forget that we're married to people who are constantly changing. Well, one of the examples that we talked about, and this could get a little awkward, but someday we'll talk in detail about sex. But have you ever noticed that every sexual encounter is different? The way you want to be touched, the things that please you, the things that please them, it's different every time. Your spouse is different. And so we want to lock people in patterns, and we want to expect certain behavior in certain ways based on certain inputs, and humans aren't that way. I think that's why we cling to tradition so much.
Right. And wouldn't it be nice when, whoever comes home first, that you come home and you go, okay, we know that there's going to be relative normalcy walking in the house versus, you've got a tiger on the tail walking in the house, and your spouse is just super frustrated about whatever that could have happened with the kids or with work or whatever, and really annoyed that trash can didn't get put out on the curb. And I know all you guys are going to be helping us take our trash cans now out. And it's Friday, by the way, is our trash day. But that's the thing, is that you want to come in and have a pattern of, okay, great, I can count on this routine at home to be relatively normal. But someday you're going to come, like Jeff would come home and I'd be completely against a deadline at work and trying to get laundry done and dinner done, and then there's coaching your child about multiplication tables or whatever, and you're helping with homework, and it's complete mayhem, and he walks in the door and is expecting me to greet him with the 6-second kiss or whatever, and it's just not gonna happen. But there you go. Go ahead. What do you want to say?
Well, where were you going with that? So, were you saying that that's a point where I need to exercise forgiveness because your world is...
Well, I was thinking about getting into their world. Sometimes you have a bad day, which is what you were talking about. Mm-hmm. We talk very differently.
Yeah, but that is helpful, and really, I think that's the summary of this whole thing. There's note when you're offended, and realize that that's a moment to forgive. B, move into the process of forgiveness by humanizing the person. And then the humanizing is getting into their world and exercising understanding. That's probably the greatest gift, because I don't think there's a single thing here that we talked about that wasn't about moving toward understanding and compassion and empathy for your spouse. And that's a huge gift to give. And
it's not a one-time gift. It's over and over, and could be multiple times a day, multiple times an hour. I'm not talking about abuse. I'm just talking about when times are chaotic, like they are at Christmas times. At Christmas time, we need to show even an extra portion of grace. And so I think the gift for this week is forgiveness wrapped with a bow of grace.
And more forgiveness and more forgiveness. And to your point, it's something that happens over and over again because we're married to humans who are going to offend us over and over again. But also with the deeper wounds, forgiveness isn't a one-time deal.
Right.
It's something that we have to revisit and revisit. I have a few incredibly deep wounds in my life, people who betrayed me very deeply. And I can say, I forgive you, but then I have to go back and forgive them again. And in some ways it circles and goes deeper and deeper. And while I say forgiveness isn't a one-time thing, it is true for God, it is, right? And so
yes.
it puts the pressure on us to feel like Jesus died on the cross, forgave me once for all, it's all done, so that's how I should be able to operate. And in a perfect world, yes, but he's God who has all of that power to understand, to see, to empathize, and can forgive all once and for all. To think that I can do that means I'm kind of elevating myself to a level of power that I don't have, that really is reserved for God. And so for me, this discipline of consistent forgiveness becomes important, especially around deep wounds.
Right. And it's not, what did you say on the very first thing, that we either act when we're offended? We either act...
we either suffer,
right,
or we keep score.
Right. So you don't want to go into the suffer category. So, okay, I'm going back to the trash can thing, but it's like I can either go walk outside.
Clearly that was an issue.
It wasn't an issue, but it's just funny. So I could either, and it's not an issue because we have a son who takes the trash out. So, but I can either walk out there and grumbling, and it's like, oh, poor me, I'm taking out the trash again because he didn't do it. Or it's just like, dang it, he hasn't done it. I've done it every week this month, and then just get angry. So you don't want to go into suffering, and suffering is kind of a deal, especially for women. And so we need to keep it in perspective and what's happening. It's just the trash. It's just dinner. It's just whatever. Sometimes there are bigger issues that this isn't a break. I mean, this isn't
not a panacea. It doesn't solve all problems, right?
Oh, panacea. Okay, that was a good word. I don't even know what that means. But anyway, it doesn't solve all the problems. But it's, I just wanted to make that point.
Yeah.
You don't want to go into suffering because you just do need to address it, and you do need to...
Nor do you want to go into scorekeeping. Neither of those are good things. And we'll talk about that. In the new year, we're going to be talking about don't make the mistakes we made. And so those will weave their way.
There have been many.
Those will weave their way into it. But here's the deal. Give the gift of forgiveness this season. Make sure that when you are offended, use that as a trigger to move into forgiveness. And the first part is to humanize. Next week, we'll talk about the next two parts and bring clarity around those. We're excited about that. And so we look forward to those conversations. Thank you for tuning in. And like us, subscribe to us, rate us if you're listening on a podcast, and help us continue to do this ministry that we're so passionate about. We really take Ephesians 4:32 seriously. Be kind to one another, forgiving one another. And we want to put on display the love of Christ by being kind. So let's be kind.
And forgive with grace. Merry Christmas. Have just a lovely time with your families. And we love you all. We're so grateful for you. And enjoy your day in a few days.
God bless you.
God bless you. Bye.
Take care.